Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a special guest. His name is Tom? Tim?
Yeah, close. Something like that. Usually just people, call me Future.
A legendary, esteemed gentleman who is responsible for Hello Future Me and all of its offshoots. A fan of a show called Severance.
Yeah, this show has taken me like nothing else. I adore it.
Better than Avatar, right?
Legitimately it is. Like let's at least be clear that I think one of them is, I think both of them are like two of the best television series are made over the last 30 years, but I think Severance has a level of uniqueness to it that brings it into a high echelon potentially.
Okay, you heard it from here, folks. Tim Hickson, Hello Future Me, says Avatar is trash and Severance is the best show. Yeah,
and here's why.
Yeah, and here's why. So we just got through season 2. Thank you for watching it as fast as possible to talk about it. I have a lot of thoughts about it, but first I think maybe we should just talk generally about what you think about season 1 compared to season 2, if you noticed any changes, or what's your experience with this show, I guess.
Non-spoiler first.
I think the main difference between season 1 and season 2 is like timeline and pacing, right? I'm pretty sure the first season's very sequential. A lot happens in a row, all building up, whereas this kind of like they're sort of jumping around one major plot point to kind of wrap it up into the final episode.
Funny enough, we haven't even talked about it very much. I think after like the 5th episode, we were like, maybe we should save our thoughts, which is the weirdest way to watch anything when you're like at home, like watching a TV show and just like some crazy shit happens and we're just like, so how you been? What did you think? Do you kind of feel the same way? Like there was a pacing issues, like timeline issues for the second season compared to the first, or what?
So I rewatched the first season before the second season came out again, because it's been 3 years. First season, maybe because I didn't know what to expect, and it's such a different show that I was kind of on the edge of my seat, whereas the second season I think had a lot more expectations going to it. I had like preconceived notion about what about this? What is actually going on? You have like kind of conspiracy theories in your mind. I thought it was slower than the first season overall, but I think the ending did not disappoint. The last episode was probably the funniest episode out of the whole like 2 seasons.
I think I forgot how funny the first few episodes of like the first season was, because like the second season, it's one of those shows where like you can play with humor so much until you realize what's going on, and then it's hard to sort of like keep doing humor when you've got this like dark reality hanging over the series.
I also wonder too if part of this is I watched the first season. We both watched the first season over like 2 days, just binging it. Yeah. I don't know. Did you do the same, or I feel like most people watched it super quick.
I think I watched it. It came out sequentially, right? Like episode by episode. Because if that was the case, I think I remember watching it as it was coming out.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, because we binged it probably like a year after it came out, and I think that has a major effect on how I view the pacing issues, because it's hard for me to judge. This happened with the show Barry too, where we watched the first couple of seasons like super quick, and then the last few seasons I'm like, I feel unsatisfied after these episodes. Like every week I have to wait, there's a new cliffhanger, but I'm like, wasn't the first season like that too?
I have a distinct memory of like seeing the trailers and stuff for it and being like, I have a weird feeling that this show is just going to be different and I'm going to like it. And so I remember, because I wasn't really watching a lot of new shows that were coming out at the time, but I decided to like take a chance on this one. So I remember watching it like as it was coming out. At least maybe there were a couple episodes or 2 or 3 episodes out at the time. The pacing of it was definitely different in the second season, in large part because of the amount of exposition that they were having to dish out.
That was a main issue for me, and I do think the show nailed it by the end, but it felt a little bit like a Sanderlanche problem of like
I
don't know if everyone here is going to recognize that word, but it's like building up the narrative. It comes from Brandon Sanderson, how his plotting works a lot of the times, where sometimes it feels like really slow, like not much is happening, but then everything collapses in on like the last in the climax, the final climax, and it's a big finale, and it's very exciting and thrilling. And I felt that watching this, but it felt like to get there, sometimes there's some plot conveniences. Miss Cobell in particular, I thought was kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, we clearly just... Yes. That's good.
Mark S.
No, there were things that it felt like, okay, the writer's room, they're kind of struggling to get there, but once they got there, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, the extra exposition, because there's like so much that was unanswered. Like the first season was left off of like, what does this all mean? What is this like happening? What is the innie-outie relationship? How do they even view themselves? Because we just see maybe the highlight of grief on the surface, but not like really going in and deep diving in what that really means. What was the grief for? Like, what really caused this person to make this decision? There was a lot of background exploration in the second season and understanding like the choices, why everyone is the way they are. And I feel like we still haven't gotten to a lot of it. Like Mr. Milchek, for example, he was, I feel like there's a lot to explore there for him too. So
yeah, Mr. Milchek is he seems like he's kind of got this like redemption arc, rebellion arc sort of brewing, like pretty explicitly, but I don't know what the direction that will be in the end.
I mean, we'll see. There are some threads that I left with unsatisfied. I think also because they have a wider plan of like how many seasons they're actually going to do, and I think it's more. I think that's why I like the first season more, simply because it felt like, all right, let's just explore this sci-fi concept and see where it goes. Like, what are the implications of like, what if you severed half of your brain, and this season was a lot more, I hate to say it, mystery box stuff of like, all right, we set up these cool mysteries at the end of season 1. What does it mean? What are the goats about? What is his wife, doing there? That kind of stuff.
It's I mean, it's interesting that you call it like mystery box in the sense that like mystery box is like, you're typically describing a narrative strategy where you're introducing questions, like the focus is on so many questions. But like I felt like season 2 was very focused on answers more than questions. Like there were a few other boxes that they introduced, but like, and they might have taken their time to get to those answers. I felt like they were basically giving answers to the start. I mean, we've kind of got a bit more about like who is Kier and why is Kier and stuff. But that to me, to some extent, feels a little bit kind of like background, I guess.
No, I guess that's true. Maybe that's another part, is that there were some straight up like, all right, let's explain to you what's happening. And they're done very well. I thought the episode with, well, I guess this would be spoiler talk more or less. I don't know. Maybe should we just get into spoilers?
Well, yeah, I just want to say, so like, I think that I agree. I can see both points. I do think that like it could have been maybe one episode less. Like the first season was 9 episodes. This one was 10. And I do think that maybe some things kind of dragged on just a little bit because there were cliffhangers in some of the episodes where I'm like, okay, this is where the next episode. And it was like, wait, so next episode after that? Like what? That was a false? Like it was kind of
annoying.
About
the Mark reintegration.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, what is, so it was, I didn't like that part, but everything else I thought like, yeah, the background needed to be explored. I did think like some things were answered and it was like, okay, that makes sense. But then some things were, the more they answered it, the more questions I had, So, I mean, hence why the series must go on so they can answer those additional questions.
It certainly has to go on with the ending to season 2.
So I rate it 8 out of 10 and I would say praise Kier.
What would you rate season 1?
Actually, oh my God, I don't know. Maybe I rate this like 9 out of 10. Yeah, I rate this 9 out of 10 because I think I think I rated like season 1 like 9 out of 10. I would say this 9.5 out of 10. I like this season a lot better than the first season.
Oh wow.
Just because, and that's strictly because I'm a little bit more biased. It's because I like the anticipation. I'm like obsessed with this show and everything else kind of building up to it. I like the cinematography and I like the directorial choices.
Oh, the visuals.
Yeah, exactly. And so I can appreciate it so much more now. So all that is adding to just like my higher score. But yeah, the way it's directed, the way that like, it's not cheesy. Like I feel like as some other shows this way could just be so straight up and easy with their answers of what happened.
What do you think, Jake?
I'm going to give this second season a 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give the first one a 9 out of 10. 7 is good. 7 is great. I'm very happy.
Oh, okay. So you're on the 5 is acceptable, good, solid. Like
5 is right down the middle. Yeah. That's how I see it. Yeah, there were issues with the season overall. I thought it came to a satisfying conclusion, but it's like, all right, we're talking like 10 hours of content that definitely could have been compressed. And I do feel like it's a bit of a victim of the streaming system of like, we have a story to tell this much, but let's stretch it out. Not as bad as some other shows, but there was a little bit of that. I think that it's really good, and I hope I'm excited for season 3. What would you say? Season 1 versus season 2 ratings?
So, I mean, I've sort of already given the game away in that I do think that Severance is probably one of the most creative best shows of the last 30 years, probably. I would say season 1 was about as close to 10 out of 10 as you can get. Like, I'm sure if I went back and I looked at it more thoroughly, I'd probably have a few criticisms, so let's just give it a 9. For this one, I'd probably give it like 8 to 8.5, I suppose. And I think that the main difference is potentially a lot of the strategies that they had to employ to sort of effectively deliver the exposition could have potentially been minimized in the sense that they could have had less sort of exposition wrapping episodes potentially if they slipped some of that into season 1 potentially. I don't know how they would have necessarily done that, but as you sort of said with the streaming service structure, there's kind of this need to set it up in a certain way to ensure that you get the next season that is maximized for streaming viewership, that potentially might have created some challenges for it in the second season, I think, without kind of giving away too many spoilers.
Well, speaking of spoilers, I think we should just get into it because in all likelihood, anyone watching this video has watched season 2.
Yeah.
So let's just get to our reactions. Like, what the hell? What was that last episode? What is your takeaway?
Well, they're making slaves, basically. So, okay, here's one thing. When I watched the first season, I didn't think that they were going to lean into the cult thing. I thought the cult aesthetic was like a corporate trick, basically. That was my reading of it. I thought that their whole, like, treating the innies like babies, pretty much. Like, that's kind of what they did. And the innies are childlike. You know, you get that moment where Gretchen, you know, like, tragically bad. I thought the whole like cult like wording and presentation was sort of like a gimmick that Lumen was employing, which is why this season I was kind of surprised to be like, oh no, they're actually a cult, like they're genuinely a cult. That did surprise me. So that was like the main thing that I was kind of like coming away with a bit surprised with. But I really liked the developments that they did for the most part.
Now that you mention it, yeah, like I think watching season 1, you could go like, okay, this is weird, but this is like an environment that they're manufacturing for them for certain reasons, for control and dominance. But then this season, you see a lot of Helena outside, you know, at work, Milchick at work, Mr. Drummond, who's like a new character who is... I was mixed about his character because I'm like, all right, he's very menacing and he has this booming voice and he talks like this. But it felt almost like, is this going too far? Is this too cartoonish into the cult world? Like, I don't know if seeing all of this is helping the story necessarily for me. Like it just started feeling like, okay, it's like a magical evil company. I felt like the social commentary necessarily started to like evaporate when we're just like, all right, they're an evil cult company, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that is partly why I was kind of a little bit surprised, because I think when you make it a cult, there is to some extent, you can sort of write it off in a weird way as like not necessarily representative of potentially the kind of evils that you might be getting at, or at least that's what some people do a lot. Mr. Drummond was very clearly a character introduced to set against Mr. Milchick and even set against Helena Egan's outie, right? Because like there are these arcs where we're sort of meant to sympathize a little bit with Helena as kind of like this victim of her father, and we're sort of meant to sympathize with Milchick as this kind of like oppressed middle manager employee trapped in his company. And Mr. Drummond is the object of that oppression, which of course culminates in the final episode when he becomes the ultimate thing to kill.
Yeah.
I love that part so much. I thought it was the funniest thing. I couldn't stop laughing. when like any Mark is like, okay, this is what you're gonna do. You're gonna go and then you're gonna talk to my Audi Mark and show him, and then they just change, and then the thing just goes off and he just kills them, and then it's just squirting everywhere, and really satisfying too.
Yeah, it was so satisfying, especially because all of the stuff I was interested in, mainly like just the relationship between Innie and Audi in that new way. I really loved, what's his name? The other guy on the severed floor. Who has the wife?
Oh,
yeah. That was my favorite.
Dylan.
Yeah. I loved the letter in the finale. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, the letter was great. That whole relationship with his wife. I mean, all of these implications that I loved about season 1 of like, all right, what would this mean? What is the like personal psychological relationship between what it would take, and you start thinking like, okay, if there was going to be equality between these characters, they'd need like 50% of each other's lives. Like, you've opened a Pandora's box of like, this is another human being in a sense. No, I loved seeing Mark talk to himself, in that opening scene in the finale when he's recording his videos, and how it almost becomes like he's talking to his 14-year-old self, or like his child self, who's just like, no, I don't want to do it. I don't trust you,
I think I really loved, like, especially with Dylan's character, there's kind of this sense of that the Innie and the Audi are almost like possible manifestations of who we could have been or who we might have been. Because she talks about how it reminded me of what you were when you were younger. That's what the wife says. And like, there's the sense of the Audi kind of realizing that like, I've made myself into this person who is more negative, who is, hypercritical, who is clearly not someone that my wife loves as much as she used to. And there's kind of this sense of like, what does work do to us as a person? How do we get ground down over time into the person that we ultimately become? And hypothetically, these innies almost represent people we could become again if we have the right circumstances. And that's what he says. He says, I hope that one day I can be the person that you were to my wife. And I really love that sort of commentary.
Yeah, I agree. Like they kind of are sheltered in this bubble, right? Whatever that bubble may be. And the outside world, there's so much more. I mean, in this world, the Innie world is complicated too, but the Audi world usually is, very complicated with like, mortgage, having to have kids and care for them, or families, or, people just everyday life, and that can kind of take you down, and you forget kind of the spirit of just go-getter or someone else that used to be. Like, kind of fear kind of starts to weigh on you. And that's what I liked about Dylan's letter to his Innie self, is that, my wife describes you as a badass, fuck you, but I also inspire to be like you. And I thought it was just also interesting because that letter gave answers to, okay, they really do. I know that they did think of themselves as different people because of like Irving and Bert, I think, like the episode where he meets the husband, and there's kind of like a three-way going on there about that tension, which was super interesting. But it's like, okay, so they are actually two people. Then what does it say about integrating and becoming two people? Are you like gonna have multiple personalities within yourself? Or so that kind of is the
integration was a thing that was like almost dropped entirely. That seemed like a misdirect from the very beginning.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, it's not entirely clear to me how it works or why it works yet. I don't know if it's necessarily meant to be super clear. In the episode after he reintegrates, it's not always 100% clear how much of him is aware or not aware, even throughout the rest of the series. Because he mentions at the final thing, like, you've been getting flashes of the outside world and stuff. We don't necessarily see a huge amount of that. I don't remember there being a huge amount of time where we see Innie Mark like seeing the outside.
No, there was just the first time I think was when he was trying to do things with Helly, or who he thought was Helly, and then he has like a vision of his wife in there, and he's like, what the heck is that? And then there's like nosebleeds, and that's kind of what I meant before about like there's things where I'm like, okay, this next episode is it. He's going to be integrated. What does that mean? And then it's like, So he's still not integrated by the end. Like it's still not like, so I just kind of felt like it was kind of, that's what it was leading up to, but then that never happened. And then that's left me with more questions than it did with answers. Cause it's like, is that really going to be possible? Like, why is that not happening? As well as like the integration doctor leaving at the end.
Yeah. Well, he's quite right when he says, so how does it work? And Mark's like, I don't know, man. Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And he's like, well, you've lived way longer than me, so isn't it? It's going to be like mostly your memories, more you than me, which is like, that's a great point. Okay, we're being very positive here. And I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer with this. And I love this show.
Spirit us down towards negativity.
Two things, which we briefly mentioned is, the integration. I think episode 3, he makes a bold decision. I want to be reintegrated. We see what happened to Petey. It killed him. So he makes that decision, and then we see images of it being done to him. And as viewers, we are told, or it's implied, that it's done. It happened. He's been reintegrated, and everyone's waiting a week going, oh my God. I remember seeing people on Twitter being like, this is why this show is great, because another show, a lesser show, would have strung this out forever. Whereas they're just getting right to it. And then I'm like, the rest of the season, it's like, well, it takes a while, guys. Let's slow down. He's not quite there yet. And then they drop it entirely. And I have to think, like, did they not have enough to do with Outie Mark's character? What were they trying to just kind of roll things along? Because, and then another thing is that it ended so unsatisfyingly in the sense of, with the doctor who's performing this operation on him, his sister finally shows up and is like, you need to leave. Let's call Miss Cobell. Like, why would she ever want to call me? Like, the lady who, like, almost kidnapped her baby, And that seemed like, okay, this is a huge stretch to be able to bring Miss Cobell back into the story and have this finale work the way it does. And the finale works great. But again, like, the plot details to get there, you have to stretch things a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a problem of, fundamentally, I think the second season was a problem of exposition, because, like, if you actually look at the significant plot beats, primarily in Mark's storyline is the sort of the one driving the plot. He basically starts out the season wanting to reintegrate and investigate Lumen, and then fundamentally his plan is basically only realized in the final episode. But to even make the final episode work, suddenly you have to introduce all of Cobell's backstory. You have to, bring in this conflict of like choosing between Helly and Gemma. You have to give Gemma's backstory. You have to reinforce the relationship that he and her used to have, and so, like, suddenly you've got all of this stuff which fundamentally is kind of like a right-hand turn away from the main plot before you can kind of progress forward with Mark's story, which is why you kind of get those first 3 episodes and then sort of all these extra side things and then the final episode. Like, that was sort of like my reading, is that, like, to deliver all this exposition, I had to creatively try and take a bunch of right-hand turns to go backwards, basically.
Yeah, I think another show would have made the Gemma backstory stuff like a B plot or a C plot throughout the entire season. And Miss Cobell, that 37-minute episode or whatever, like, that could have been a B plot and much shorter in another episode. So I thought their decision to put those right before the finale, when everyone's like, okay, let's get going, let's get moving, I thought it was a poor decision from like a storytelling level to do that. I thought had enough confidence from the viewers, but I think at that point in the season, people were like, okay, what the hell? We thought more would have happened by now. And I think that's why I saw overall some dissatisfaction. I think the episode with Miss Cobell is like the lowest rated one in the season.
Which I 6.9 or something on IMDb, which I mean, personally, I really liked the episode. I do agree that I could have done it in half the time, probably. Let's be honest there. They introduced like 2 or 3 other characters in that episode who maybe they'll come back. I don't know if they'll come back, It was interesting, but they definitely could have done it in less time.
Yeah, I feel like in that episode, like, what we learned most importantly is like, okay, Miss Cobell like invented Severance, basically. We know that she had like a weird cult upbringing childhood. Getting to see some of the details and her trauma with that, helps humanize her a little bit. But I think I felt like I get it. You know, she was part of a cult. You know, she grew up in a weird way. I don't need to see her. I don't know. How did you feel about that?
I don't agree that like we knew that she grew up in a cult, because the only thing that in season 1 that we had, you know, with the idea that she was maybe cult like was the Kier posters and candles. And it's like I didn't know if she was exclusively crazy because she was also like, you know, stalking Mark and they didn't know about it. And so it seemed like she had more things going there than other people, because we just didn't explore the company to the point that we did in season 2 yet. I think too, you made an earlier point about if they were going to lean into the cult arc or not, and they did. But in the season 1, they could have really gone with anything. Like they could have gone with cult, or they could have been like, this is really truly office life balance, and maybe like a parody of The Office in a very far-fetched way about, you know, what does it mean when you truly have life office balance where it's completely separated, like what you get out of it and everything else, because we didn't explore like anyone else's really character, at least not deep dive into what they're like. Dylan, Irving, I think we knew like a little hints of, but we didn't really understand like what led these other people to the decision that they did. And, you know, they all had different reasons. Like Irving, he's spying. We don't know for who. And Dylan, he just literally can't hold down a job. And it's like, this is the only way, I guess. I'm not like a 9-to-5 kind of person. So whatever works, you know, and really truly lost a passion in his life for that, which is why I think the letter in itself kind of is full circle for that. But yeah, I like was frustrated with the Miss Cobell episode a little bit when it first came out, because I was like, I felt like the episode before had so many promises about like the next episode when it had to do with Mark. But then at the end, I understand exactly why that needed to be the way it was. And I think that if they hadn't gone that route where it was that length, maybe cutting 10 minutes shorter or something here and there, then I think we would have been a little annoyed about like, okay, but now why did she grow up this way? What did it really mean? Like, did she just like, what about her parents? And I think that it's really nice and satisfying really knowing Miss Cobell and where she's coming from, instead of like a stereotypical character like, oh, she's just crazy, and giving a purpose to her movements.
How much more of her, not necessarily her storyline, but kind of that backstory to Lumen, do you think that they are setting up with that episode? Because like there was an interesting line where her mother-ish figure kind of goes, you know, there was no town before Lumen, and like they go to the ruined factory, and like it implies that like something has happened here that we aren't fully yet realizing. Do you think that they're like setting up kind of a much deeper and longer story with that?
I think so, because you know that these people are people who are raised in this cult, you know, and she's not the only one. And we know that like the guy, I forget his name, that she goes and drives there with to the old house that she grew up, you know, we know there's more people that were implicated, some who wanted to get out, went a different direction with that. And then we have people like Miss Cobell who went fully in on it, you know, and kind of even like the sacrificial animal, the goat, and all those things right there. It's like, okay, this is a whole thing that they're doing, like a cult, you know, with all of that, and them taking their time to explore what that means, what that looks like. I don't know how much more they're going to go into it, because we also still have, you know, Helly with her dad coming in and being like, I never saw Kier I don't love my daughter. I don't love any of my kids because Kier wasn't in them, but Kier's in you. And look, that's Kier right there, you know, the rebelliousness. And so there has to be some more background exploration, if not with like other people in the cult itself, maybe like a inner family cult of the Eager family, and what that really means to grow up, Egan family, what does it really mean to actually grow up in this household that is the leader of this cult, you know?
Did you read that moment where he goes, I can see the fire of Egan in you, as foreshadowing that they want to replace Helena with Helly? Like they want to completely switch. So, because like I was sort of, and I was looking down, I was like, oh, so all this time we've been thinking that innies are the ones in danger. Potentially Helena is the one in danger here.
Oh,
I did.
I didn't even think of that.
That's interesting. I did, because then I was like thinking about Helena, like during that diner scene with Mark where she kind of stalks Mark. And and then also like the beginning of season 2 episode where she's like smiling, looking at her Innie kiss Mark, and she's like pretending, and then of course they have sex together, the Innie Mark and Audi.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like that where it's almost like, did Helena actually like the Innie Mark, or like Mark period? Is she trying to get with him because she kind of is like, I like the person you make me feel, or is she actually manipulative, But so it's still questionable. He's gonna try to, like, the dad is gonna try to break the Innie Helly, where he's gonna try to get her into the mindset where he wants her to completely be the way that he sees her being, because he sees the light in her that he's missing from his other kids. And sounds like he had a lot of kids to try to get that light in them, So I think we're definitely going to see that exploration of what does it really mean, and is she going to actually turn? I don't think she's going to turn at the end, but I think there's going to be a lot of attempt at doing that. And maybe she's going to use, because she cares about like her friends in the Innie world, I think they're going to use like the Innie friends to kind of be a strategic step to get her to turn a little bit, where it's kind of like, you got to be part of the company in order to change it. Yeah.
I don't see that happening. I don't see Helly switching over to that side. I mean, I do think maybe they'll try to do some more like severing with her to like, I don't know, somehow make her think she's been the outie all the time. But I think also like part of the issue is I was doubtful whether that was actually Helly at the end running off with Mark.
Yeah, I've seen doubt of that online, like a glimmer of a smile, in the turning away or whatever.
I don't know. I mean, probably not, but I think that it's important that the show has now established like, you can't be sure. You don't know if it's her or not. There's way more of that blurring between these personalities than they realize, that they're a lot more like their outies than they even realize, and their innies, because I guess it's like that nurture versus nature question that the show is posing in a sense. When Gemma is outside, she's finally free and herself, and she sees her husband, I realized finally like, oh wait, she doesn't realize that Mark is severed. She's just watching her husband
run off with
some other woman.
I hadn't actually thought of that. Yeah,
like, that's traumatic. Like, we're finally free, and he's just like, yeah, but
I'm with someone else now. This is just a favor I did for you.
Yeah.
Have you seen all those comparisons to Orpheus and Eurydice? It's the myth where they're trying to get out of hell, and if they look back, they die, or that sort of thing. I don't know if it's intentional, but it's definitely interesting.
It's there. It's definitely there. I mean, at this point, like, where do you both think the show is gonna go? Like, I can.
Is Gemma gonna be the main character?
That would be cool. I think that'd be really cool. Of like, all right, now, but also I feel like Mark is still going to be severed. I feel like they're going to still need him for something. Maybe are they just going to keep him down there? But are they going to fake his death? Like, how much power, I guess, does Lumen have? How much control over the government do they have? Can they? How much? Let me see the Lumen lobbyists. Let's see what's going on.
They've one thing that I think has been smart is that they haven't really shown us the outside world. A few lines, like I think there's a line of like a pregnant woman saying that she skipped giving birth by severing herself. And there's like a couple of lines of like people, like it's definitely said that other companies have severed floors.
There's protests too. There's like
yes, this, but we don't really know what the implication of how far reaching severed is. I have like a vague memory of some sort of church service. Yes, that was in the episode with Irving and the two older guys. They talk about how the church has an official position on the souls of severed individuals, of innies, which means that it's clearly pretty widespread. They haven't really shown us much of the outside world, and I think that it would probably be a mistake too.
Yeah, I think like some things you don't want to answer too much, or else it leads to kind of like holes. I thought it was interesting that the church church's, at least this church's official point of view is that Innie is actually a different person. So that's why you want to sever yourself, because if you're a bad person on the outside, that's okay, because your Innie's going to be a good person.
Really interesting justification.
Yeah,
like some part of me will
yeah.
go to heaven.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, and it's kind of like almost like this, I don't know, magical weight loss candy, I guess, is where you can eat all the junk food you want. You're not going to like gain any weight, and you can just do whatever you want, you know?
What's the worst thing that you would send your Innie to? You see that I saw a tweet of someone being like, someone whose Innie's entire life is just band practice. Like, because in the final episode, when you realize that like they have a band practice floor.
I just gotta say, I'm so happy they gave Milchick another chance to dance. I was like, you know what? If they let Milchick dance in every single episode, like 10 out of 10 for me.
Oh yeah.
It's just so fun.
They had to do it to the last episode too, which was great. Like the way he dances and everything else. And I really thought that he was gonna have like a different character choices at the end than he did.
I think they're setting up a multi-season arc for him. Yeah. There's definitely some multi-season stuff. Like Rickon, working on his book. That kind of didn't really turn out into anything this
Oh, yes. Yeah, because they want to give that to all the Innies or something. He's like basically making Lumen propaganda.
Yeah. Also, what is his sister doing with that baby? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just us having a baby and being like, didn't you, like, where's that baby? What's going on?
How do you have all this time in your hands?
Yeah.
But
that's true. I hadn't really thought of that, but I suppose if you have like a child, like you have like a level of like understanding that the child has to be doing something somewhere now. Like, I mean,
he's at work. Yeah. I mean, our baby's at work right now, so he's just.
Oh, you get them severed. Put them
we got
in
him severed
daycare.
Yeah.
he has to pay for what he earns in life. He has to know that,
I guess, I don't know, maybe we can wrap this up and kind of just go along with our final thoughts. Where do we think season 3 is going to go? How does Severance hold up in the realm of like general like sci-fi TV? Like what do you think its legacy is going to be?
Do you want to go first, Nadia?
Season 3, I already explored like what I think the Helly and Helena dynamic may be with the dad situation. I mean, personally, I would love for Mark to end up with, Gemma, because it's, they have a history together, the whole like child and infertility issue and everything.
Oh, because screw the Innies, right? Like, yeah. No,
integrate everyone is what I think. I mean, in a perfect world, but obviously that's me coming from an audience and not like a writer's point of view about what should happen. I think that it would be really fun to see the tension, because Helly really hates her outie so much. So it would be like interesting if that hate that she has for her outie is manipulated by the dad to become the outie or become more like it, because I think only Irving knew the difference between those two in the second season. Not even Mark could tell the difference. So I think that's really interesting what you were saying earlier about that. It would be good to see like more of what if Miss Cobell is actually like genuine, because I think she still wants to be the leader. I think she's just going around like trying to have more of a firmer hand, because she wants to manage the seventh floor. She wants to be the one and not Milchick to be in charge. And I think that Milchick is going to have a breakdown. I think it's all leading up to him having a breakdown about like, screw this company, and I think he's like he's having an internal battle all season, and that's why I was surprised at the end. So I think that's going to be interesting to explore. And I think Gemma is going to get together with a sister-in-law to be like, any Mark is the problem. We know that, right?
You've got to kill any Mark.
So how can we get any Mark on our side kind of thing? I think there's going to be more of like a sister-in-law bonding experience happening in the third season, because we know like Devin really loves her sister-in-law and they have a good relationship beforehand. So,
Yeah, I will mention one more thing before I give my final thoughts, which is that the whole goat sacrifice scene at the end, that did strike me a little bit as convenient, that it was on the floor and right in front of the door. And like, I felt like they were trying to get a way to get Mr. Drummond in front of like into Mark's like path like that, and also do that thing. But anyways, I think we're still currently at the, you could call it the lost season 4 point, or whatever it is, where there's still a lot of questions, places that they can go. They've still got to land it, right? They've still got to actually bring all of this to a satisfying close without, easy ways out. Because I mean, the whole point of this sort of like this season finale is that like Innie and Nadia Mark being like, hey, there is no easy way out for either of us. We can't both get what we both want, really. Sometimes these shows will maybe a little bit chicken out on that question, in the end. And so I feel like we still have enough ahead of us that they don't have to give an answer just yet. I think that we're going to see a lot more from Gemma's perspective, probably in the coming seasons. I think that we're going to learn a lot more about what or who Kia really is and what that whole story really is going on about. Honestly, don't know what the plan is for Mark. And I don't know if I wouldn't be surprised if the writers don't have an entire idea of exactly what they're gonna do. Oftentimes they'll know kind of like the self-contained story, which might be 1 or 2 seasons, but they don't know they don't know what they're going to get beyond that. I have seen people say that like Ben Stiller thinks that he does have a full plan. I don't know how true that is. I think that we're probably going to have a pretty big shift in like what the focus of the plot is next season, but I don't think we know what that is, and I don't think we can guess what that is. I feel like they've probably done the big story that they really wanted to get out of the way for the moment, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? How do we develop this, and how do we answer this final thing from here? That's probably my feeling.
That's a great point. I do feel like I have restored faith in the show of like, all right, they're not just going to spiral out of control, because I feel like the bulk of the questions have been answered. Yeah. There's still remaining stuff of like, how does, but like the main stuff with Gemma, like we ended season 1 on just questions. It was just all questions of like, what is all of this going to mean? And it was exciting, but I feel like the end of season 2 is a lot more satisfying, because if it got canceled somehow, it won't, but if it got canceled, I feel like it has like a movie scene ending. It's The Graduate, it's just that like freeze frame of like, there was a choice made. It's tragic, but this is life. Like it's that
it would
ambiguity.
Be an ending.
Yeah, it would be an ending, and it would work. So I felt like, all right, this is something. Clearly, stuff is going to happen, but I feel like now the show would be wise to just focus more on how do we resolve these character dynamics? How do we get our characters to a place where they can be happy and coexist, Innie and Outie? And what would that mean long term for themselves, but also for the world? But the like mechanics of the Severance floor and what's going on with Gemma and all those mysteries, I'm really glad that that's basically figured out. We basically know what was going on and that she's out of there. So because of that, I'm happy, and I'm really excited for the next season.
Do we know that she's out of there? She's just at the stairwell. Like outside.
Yeah, imagine the first scene of the next show is just like
getting captured.
Oh, yeah. And they're like, dude, you've just been standing here for an hour.
Yeah, it's that's like the symbolic exit. It's the symbolic stairway to heaven. No, I agree. I think that it's kind of like the Succession thing, where like they just did the 4 seasons, they had a great ending, and I think that they have the capacity to do this. They basically gave us a bunch of questions, they gave us a bunch of answers, and now they've just got to tie up sort of the loose ends. The temptation is to introduce a whole bunch more questions to see how far you can go.
Yeah, I will say this, whenever this series does end, and if the ending is tragic like it was in Succession, I'm seriously going to have like a week and a half, maybe a month of pure depression. Like I am
the eldest boy.
Yeah. It's just I feel so invested in just this character.
No, I mean, I don't know. Do you have any more thoughts? Or I know you got to go, but anything else?
I'm good. This was great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much having me on. I love this, and I think that your second channel's really coming along. It's great.
Thank you very much. And it's not surprising that you love this show. It reminds me of some of your short stories that I've read, and it's very much that high concept, very good, thrilling kind of stuff.
Thank you.
Shout out to your short stories and all your books, your world building writing books, very good stuff. So I don't know, do you want to shout anything out before you go?
That was some nice merch that I thought I saw you drinking from there.
This?
Yeah, that. And where can I get that?
Nowhere right now. It is because we love to not make money on this channel.
Oh, this has been great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.